Hi, my name is Bill, KK6OSR, and today I'm going to be walking you through downloading, installing, and setting up the MD380 software for your radio to be able to use it on the Helix Amateur Radio Club repeater here in Southern California. If for some reason you have not received my Google Drive information containing the link and also the frequency pairs to use on the repeater, please shoot me an email, kk6osr@gmail.com, or you can get a hold of Nathan, KB6PLH, and he can point you in the right direction. The frequency pairs will not be in this video, so you do need to get the frequency pairs to be able to set up your MD380 software. Once you get it, go ahead and go to the link. You're going to click on the USB driver, and then right-click it and click on Download. It's going to ask you for where you want to download it. Go ahead and save it wherever you are comfortable saving it and you know where to go to find it later. Once it finishes downloading, go ahead and click on the MD380 software, right-click again, and click Download. Once that's finished downloading, you can go ahead and close out of your browser. Go ahead and double-click on your My Computer and go to the location that you downloaded these files, and then here shortly I will show you how to install these files. Okay, now that we have the two files downloaded, we need to get them installed on your system. So what you need to do is double click on the My Computer and then just browse out to wherever you save these two files to. Typically, it gets saved in the Downloads folder underneath your profile. Once you're there, you're going to click on the MD380 USB driver, right click on that, and click Extract All. The path that you see in the video is going to be different from the path you have on your machine. Just leave it as is and go ahead and click Extract. This is going to pop up a new window. Just go ahead and close that window out for now. And do the same thing for the MD380 setup. Right click, Extract All. Once again, leave the path as is, click Extract, and close out that window that pops up. Now we're going to go ahead and install the MD380 setup file. So double click on the MD380 setup, and then double click on the MD380 setup executable. Go ahead and click Next. For the path, you can change this if you want to. I typically just leave it as is, just preference, and go ahead and click Next. Click Next, and Next one more time. Go ahead and click Finish. And now the MD380 software is installed in your machine. What we need to do is go back a folder so that we can go ahead and get the USB driver installed. So go back and then go to the MD380 USB driver. Double click on that folder. Double click on USB driver. And on this AMD64 executable, you're going to click on it and then you're going to right click and choose Run as Administrator. This should install the driver for your system. If for some weird reason, when you plug in your radio, if it prompts for a driver, it's going to ask you for the path of the driver. Just point the installer out to this folder here, and it should install the driver manually that way. Sometimes when you right click and run as administrator on the AMD64 executable, it doesn't install the driver properly, and this is a way to get around that issue. Up next, I'm going to show you the brief overview of the software.
Please listen carefully.
Okay, now that we have the software installed, go ahead and launch it up, and then this is the screen that you'll see when you first launch the software. This just shows basic information. It shows information like the model number for the software, the last program date, and the software version. The serial number, hardware version, MCU version, and the unique device ID will be blank by default. This information doesn't get filled out until after you read from the radio. I always recommend when you're starting out with a fresh code plug to read the radio first to populate the serial number and the hardware version, MCU version, and unique ID. To do that, you just go up here to this little yellow arrow with a radio next to it. You push on that, and then it's going to read the radio information into the software, and it will populate these fields. There's some people that say if you don't do this, you could have problems down the road with your code plug and being able to program the radio properly. Some of the Bofanes have this issue. If the serial number doesn't match and the hardware version doesn't match, it can cause some programming issues. So just for, safe to be sorry, just read the radio first before you start doing the code plug. General settings, this basically just has a few settings that you'll use. Radio name, it just has to be a unique name for the radio. Typically, I just put in my call sign here, but it can really be named anything that's unique. It's just a way to identify the software knows which radio it's talking with. The radio ID field is a really important field. This is your call ID. If you're going to be using anything like the PAPA system or any type of linked network systems, you need to go to the DMR-MARC website and register for a call ID. It's a process that you go through, you give them your email address, your call sign, and they shoot you out an email with a call ID. If you're not planning on using any type of link system, then you'll probably just use one of our numbers that we've designated for the Helix Amateur Radio Club, which typically starts with 6100 and then followed by another number. Other options here are pretty much self-explanatory as to what they do. You really don't change too much on this screen other than the radio name and the call radio ID. Menu items, this is just real basic. If you want to disable any menus from the radio, you basically will uncheck these boxes and it will remove that option from the radio. I really don't see any reason that you would do this to your own radio, so it's probably something you're not going to lose. Button definitions, when you click on this, it does take a minute for it to pull up, and it does look like the software freezes on you, but it's actually not frozen, so just be patient and let it load. This is where you can set up your menu buttons on the side of the radio. The MD380 has two, one right above the PTT and one below the PTT. So this is where you can set up your long press duration, what the buttons do, the one-touch access, and the numeric quick contacts access. I'm not going to be going over in this video as it's a little bit more advanced for text messaging. Text message menu here basically goes back to the menu definitions on the quick key text. Once again, I'm not really going to be going over that. Privacy settings, we can't encrypt on amateur networks, so go ahead and just close that. We won't be using that. Same thing with the emergency system, not something that we're going to be using. The digital contacts is something that you're going to be using quite a bit of. Basically, this allows you to set up call groups to name people's call ID back to their call sign or their name. Makes it a little bit easier on the radio, so if someone keys down, it will actually show their name there instead of just a string of numbers. And I'll go through this more on the here in a little bit on showing you how to set this up. Group list is basically where you're going to be setting up the RX groups. Once again, in the next video or the next section of this video, I'll go into more detail on how to set this up for the Helix Amateur Radio Club repeater here in Southern California. So for right now, just know this is where you set up your group list. Zone information, basically this is where you're going to be setting up your zones. Zones kind of house channels. On the MD380 radio, you can only have 16 channels inside of one zone. So if you want to have more channels in your radio, then you're going to have multiple zones. And a zone is just a way to organize a bunch of channels. So it makes a little bit of logical sense when you're on your radio. Next up is scan list. Scan list is where you set up the channel that you want to scan on a particular zone, or channels that you want to scan outside of other zones. And also you can set the priority channel. You can have two different priority channels. And once again, I will go over in more detail on how to set this up in the upcoming section. Channel information is where you're going to be setting up your channels. This is probably where you're spending the majority of your time when you're programming your code plugs. The channel mode, if you're doing digital, you make sure it's choose digital. If you're doing analog, choose analog. Bandwidth for digital is always going to be the 12.5. The scan list, this is where you set your scan, what scan list you want this particular channel to use. Squelch, the RX frequency, TX frequency, pretty much leave those alone. The TOT you definitely want to change. 1 minute is a little short. Otherwise your radio is going to be squawking at you constantly. Your TOT relay, more likely you leave that alone as well. Your power setting for the radio, it automatically defaults as high. I personally always like setting mine to low. And then if I need to, I bump it up to high. It just saves battery. Your channel name, and then your frequency pairs for your receive and your transmit. Admit criteria. This is a little new if you're not used to digital. Basically, it allows you to set up so that you can't key up your radio if there's already someone transmitting on the repeater at the time. You'll get it like a little arrow tone on your radio. So it's pretty cool for digital. Auto scan, I wouldn't recommend turning that on, but you can if you want to. So as soon as you turn to that particular channel, it will automatically start scanning your scan list. RX only, if you have a channel in here that you don't necessarily want to transmit on ever, then you can click on that. Lone worker, it's not something we're going to be using. Vox, once again, something that you'll set up if you're going to be using Vox. Allow talk around. You have to have this checked if you want to be able to use talk around for this particular channel. Even though you can set up a quick key for it. If you don't have it enabled here, it will not work, even if you push the quick key. These first four checkboxes here for basic amateur operation, we won't be messing with those. The emergency system, we also will not be messing with that as well. The contact name is where you can set up the contact name for this channel. The group list is where you're setting up your RX or your receive group list for this channel. Color code, this is really important to make sure that you have the right color code for the repeater that you're using. The repeater slot, or what it's more commonly called as the time slot, you'll have two options, 1 and 2, and privacy and encryption. Once again, something that we don't use. So here coming up next, the next section here is the DTMF signaling. If you want to set up squawks to drive people crazy, knock yourself out. I won't be going over configuring this. This is a little bit more advanced and not really needed for our amateur use. So in the upcoming video, or the next section here, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through setting up the software to actually use the Helix Amateur Club repeater here in Southern California. Okay, now that you have a basic idea of what the menus are in the software, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through setting up the code plug to actually work on the Helix Amateur Radio Club repeater. Remember to always read your radio first when you're first setting up the code plug. It's just a good basic habit to get into. So we're going to go ahead and click on the General Settings tab. The General Settings tab, you're going to be setting up your radio name. This just needs to be unique. Typically, I always put in the user's call sign. The radio ID or call ID, if you're going to be using the Papa system or any leak systems, you need to get a registered ID for the DMR-MARC website. If you're going to be using just our local repeater, then you'll be given a call ID of like 6104. You can only be used locally on our system though. Don't try to go to Papa system and use that radio ID. Preference, the radio backlight, I always set it to 5 seconds. Otherwise, it stays on all the time. Once again, another preference is the tones. The talk permit tone, I always typically leave that on for digital. And the channel free indicator tone, you can leave that on or turn it off. It's preference. What this does is when you key down the radio, it'll make a tone. And then after someone does a transmission and they end their transmission, you'll get a tone. Some people don't like that. Some people don't like any of the tones turned on at all. Some people like both of them turned on. I personally just like to have the talk permit tone turned on. So from there, we're going to go to the button definition. Once again, it is going to kind of freeze up again. I don't know why it does this. It just does. So just bear with it, and it will load up here shortly. Personal preference, I always set this to 3000 milliseconds. I don't want to have a belt bump or something. For button 1, I normally always set this to the high power, low power. And then for the long press, I will typically set that to scan on off. And then for button 2, I normally will set that to talk around. The button 2 long press, I typically don't assign anything to that. You could if you wanted to. One text access and the quick number contact access. Once again, I'm not going to be going over setting those up, so just leave those as is, or you can play with it if you want to. We won't be using privacy settings, the digital emergency system. So on the contacts here, what we're going to be doing is creating a contact called local. We're going to make sure the call type is group call, and the call ID is going to be 2. This is very important. It has to be done exactly as you see on the screen here. Otherwise, you're going to have issues getting into the repeater. The repeater listens for call ID 2 to be able to pass the traffic across. Now, if you want to, you can create contacts on the radio for other amateur operators to make it look a little bit nicer on the radio so you don't have to match a number. You can actually match their call sign. To do that, click on Add. And then for the contact name, I'm just going to use Nathan as an example here. So I'm going to go ahead and put in KB6PLH, which is his call sign. And then for the call type, you want to make sure you set this to private call. It's important that you do that, otherwise this isn't going to work out the way you want it to. For the call ID, for him, his call ID actually is 4000. So now what will happen is when Nathan keys up his radio, your radio is going to have, it's going to be received by your radio as call ID 4000. But since you have this contact in here, the radio is going to reference and look at the contact and see KBPLH is in there. So instead of showing 4000 on your MD380 screen, you'll actually see KB6PLH. Obviously, if you wanted to say Nathan, you could always put Nathan in there instead of the call sign. Next is your group list. For this, I'm just going to be naming it an abbreviated version of the club name. You can call this really whatever you wanted to if you really wanted to, but I'm going to call it HARC TAC Network. And as you can see, there's already a contact member in here, that local that we just created. You want to make sure that you go ahead and just leave that in there. We're going to go to zone. For zone names, you can call it whatever you want to call it. For this presentation, I'm just going to call it local. I'm not very creative, but you can think of creative names to call your zones. And once again, the zones house all your channels. So you probably want the zone name to relate to the channels that you're putting inside that zone. For the scan list, once again, since we made that group list, HARC TAC Network, we're going to make this scan list the same basic naming format. So HARC. And then you see a default channel in there for right now. Just leave that as is, and we'll come back to this. But this is where we're going to be adding channels for all of our repeaters that we have here in Southern California into the scan list, so that when you hit scan on your MD380, it will actually scan the digital side and also scan the analog repeaters. So next, we're going to go to the channels. And this is where we're going to be setting up all the channel information. So for this purpose, we're going to go ahead and set up the digital repeater first. So for the channel mode, we're going to leave it as digital. The bandwidth is going to be 12.5. Scan list, we're going to set to the ARC. The squelch, the REL frequency, REL TX frequency, leave it alone. The TOT, I can set it to 120. If you want to set it to infinite, you can. Power, I typically set it to low. You can leave it as high if you want to. Channel name, you want to make sure that you name this something that makes sense. So for this particular example, I'm just going to follow the same naming convention, HARC TAC TS1. That TS basically stands for time slot 1. For the receive frequency and the TX frequency, you should receive an email with that. I will not be publishing the frequency pairs on the video. For admit criteria, we want to set this to channel free. What this is going to do, if someone's already talking on the radio or on the frequency, when you key up your radio, it's not going to allow you to key up. It'll give you an error message or error tone. Allow talk around if you want to allow it. The 4 check boxes, we're not going to mess with those. The emergency system, once again, not going to mess with that. Contact name set to local. Group list, We'll set that to the HARC network. Color code, really, really important. We're going to set that to 1. It's kind of like the PL for digital. Would be the easiest way to describe what that does. Repeater time slot, leave it as 1 as we're on time slot 1 for this program. And then privacy, none. So once you have that, if you maximize the window, you'll see the little add button. You have to maximize it to see it. So click add, go to the channel name, and then we're going to make a channel for time slot 2. So HARC TAC TS2. Once again, we're going to go back through these settings again, the scan list, set it to HRC, TOT, set it to 120 or infinite, power level, whatever your preference is. Once again, the frequency pairs are going to be the same as the last one. MIT channel, channel free, allow talk around, contact name, local, group list, the HARC network, color code 1, and this time we want to make sure we change this to 2 because we're going to be on time slot 2. If you don't change this, then you're going to be transmitting on time slot 1, so make sure you do change that. Your privacy, once again, is going to be set to none. So click add again, and this time we're going to set up the analog channels. So we're going to make sure we change the channel mode to analog. Make sure that you change the bandwidth for the analog mode to the 25. Otherwise, you're not going to be very happy with your audio. Scan list. We want to make sure that we once again select the HARC. Go down to your TOT, set it to 120 or infinite. Power level, always set to low. Channel name. Since this is the analog one, I'm just going to call it Miguel. For me, I know this is an analog channel because I don't have the TAC TS1. That's kind of how I know if I'm on a digital channel or not. Emit criteria, you want to set to always for analog. And then the PL or DCS stuff, the PL stuff's at the top. If you scroll down, you can see the DCS stuff. So if your repeater pairs require encode decode, make sure that you set that up appropriately. That's where you do it for the analog channels. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is add another channel here, analog. Once again, 25. Scan list HARC. TOT, we're going to set to 120. Power, low. Channel name, and then this one we're going to name Palomar. And this is going to be the channel for the Palomar repeater. Once again, emit criteria, you just want to leave as always. And then if you want to allow talk around, make sure you check mark that. And then make sure you set up your encode decode if that repeater requires that information. And that's pretty much it for getting the channels set up for the code plug for both analog and also digital. Now that we have the channels in here, we need to make sure that we put these channels into a zone. Otherwise, you will not see these channels in your radio. So we're going to go up here to zone information to local, which is the one that we created. And then we're going to go ahead and click on the HARC TS2 and then click add, and then add again. And basically that's putting all of the Helix Amateur Radio Club repeaters into this local zone. Okay, so now that we have the zone set up, we have all the channels in here set up for the repeaters and the time slots. We went ahead and created the zone and our scan list. Now we just need to export this information or the code plug out to your MD380 radio. So how you do that is just click on this little red arrow that's pointing towards the radio. And once you click on that, it's going to go ahead and output all of this information into your radio. Once it's done, I recommend turning off your radio, unplugging your USB cable, and then turning your radio back on. Just good practice. You don't have to do that. So if you accidentally forget and you start playing with your radio with it still plugged into the laptop or your computer, it's not going to mess anything up. It's just good practice to actually shut the radio off, unplug it, and then turn it on to test your code plug. Hopefully you won't have any issues. If you do run into problems or you run into have any questions, feel free to give me an email and I'll be more than happy to help you out. Once again, kk6osr@gmail.com.